All right, man, peace. So, brothers, even though I've been moderately busy over the past few weeks, I have been following this Jay-Z, Colin Kaepernick NFL storyline, this narrative per se. And as I watch it transpire, it never ceases to amaze me how easy it is to polarize the populace at large just by getting them to believe that they have an understanding of something that they truly have no grasp of. And as I've told you, brothers, from the very start, especially when it comes to Kaepernick, all he is a corporate pawn and a corporate whore. He's a cultural Marxist whose job it was to change the NFL into a fountain of social engineering. That's all his job was. That's why he was an agent of chaos from the very beginning. He has no plan. He will never have a plan because he's not intelligent enough to execute the plan. He's an extremely important asset who's been strategically handled by Miss Ness Nitty, a.k.a. Nessa Diab, as well as Nate Boyer, who's kind of faded into the background. But when we consider Jay-Z, and there's so many wokey-wokes all over the internet trying to call Jay-Z a coon and a sellout, I don't understand how Jay-Z could be a sellout when he never reported to Colin Kaepernick to begin with. He operated as an independent contractor, as Jay-Z always does. And when I evaluate the Hove, a.k.a. Sean Carter dynamic from a distance, I will liken it unto one of these James Bond movies, where at the very beginning, 007 is called into the office and he's told what his task is going to be. And the reason why he's being dispatched is because they already have an agent in play who was unable to accomplish the mission. Jay-Z, in my view, is the proverbial 007 of the black entertainment sphere. His job, just like Kaepernick, is to change over the NFL, to recalibrate it, to make it a bastion of cultural Marxism. What do I mean when I say cultural Marxism? To push and promote quote unquote equality. For those of you cats out there who don't know what socialism is basically the concept of stating to the masses that we're going to take what you create, what you develop, or what you earn, take it within ourselves, talking about those who are quote unquote duly elected, and then redistribute it to the masses under the guise of quote unquote equality or helping the poor, taking away class distinctions, etc. Now, Marxism is described as the quote unquote eternal battle between the worker and the ruling class, or what Karl Marx called the proletariat. This is another reason why you'll find many politicians and entertainers today, especially politicians of the super liberal bent, who love to push the victimization mentality. All they're doing is taking Marxism and they're recoining it, they're rephrasing it, so that they can use certain factions and demographics, especially so-called black people, particularly black men, as an army for them to justify bringing in new reforms and implementing certain ideologies that are going to be detrimental to the populace at large once they're implemented. But that's Jay-Z's role once again. He was brought in to finish the job that Kaepernick could not accomplish. Believe me, they're both on the same team, even though Kaepernick might not realize it because he's working from such a low level. But Nessa Diab understands what Jay-Z's role is, and that's why she's running her mouth on Instagram and Twitter or whatever. Remember, she's in the music industry, so she knows the power that Jay-Z has. If she was someone who was totally obtuse and did not grasp the power that Jay-Z had, he would make it known to her the power that he has by getting her fired. Just the fact that she's rambling on, running her mouth, and will keep her job should help you understand that behind the scenes, they're Confederate. I've stated this in the past. I'm still not convinced that Colin Kaepernick is even the person who's commenting on his own Instagram. I believe that it's Nessa Diab. And as I have stated also in the past, there's no doubt in my mind that Colin Kaepernick is an MK asset and a monarch athlete. So why was Jay-Z brought in? Because as he tells you in his music, he is the chairman of the board. He is the black Frank Sinatra. He is the person who is going to be at the epicenter of any dialogue or interaction between the ruling elite, especially the super liberal ruling elite, particularly in Europe and in America, who are culturally Marxist, the international bankers, etc., and the so-called black masses of the captivity here in North, Central, and South America. They want Jay-Z to be the face of quote-unquote black change. And he has the intellect and the shrewdness to do it, something that Colin Kaepernick does not have. The Colin Kaepernick narrative, at least this portion of it, is coming to an end. It's going to be transitioned over to Jay-Z, who once again has always called himself the quote-unquote black Frank Sinatra. And if you know anything about Frank Sinatra, he was not just a great singer or a crooner, as they say. He was also a very high-level MK handler / MK programmer. He used to handle Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, etc. He was also a point man for the mafia all throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's very similar to Jay-Z. The lyrics that he spews in his songs have a resonance. He says those things for a reason. Jay-Z handles the entire hip-hop industry. All these top-level witches, Jermaine Dupri and Snoop Dogg and 50 Cent, they have to stand down. They cannot say anything against Jay-Z. That's why they will always say, let's see what he's going to do. Let's give him a chance. And they're not speaking from an intellectual perspective. They understand what the hierarchy is behind the red curtain. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Jay-Z, whose entertainment company, Roc Nation, is a major deal with the NFL. Jay will now be in the leading role with the league's social justice program, and then Roc Nation will be kind of in the leading role for entertainment content, including the halftime for the Super Bowl show.
This is exactly why Jay-Z is getting involved. This is going to amplify his profile. It's going to give him the ability to augment his financial dossier per se, because he's not really a billionaire. Even though you have these magazines like the Forbes 500 list, so on and so forth, who will tell you that Jay-Z is a billionaire. He's not really a billionaire right now. But this will assist him in becoming a billionaire. And it will also help him being the quote-unquote face of change in America. Taking the number one sport, the number one quote-unquote pastime in America, that being football, and helping them quote-unquote catch up with the times. I cannot stress the importance of having Jay-Z involved in this venture, because he's going to legitimize whatever the NFL decides to do, especially in relation to the quote-unquote black community. But they're going to have to make it look good early. Jay-Z is going to have to show his face a lot. They're going to have to provide a lot of money and funding to so-called black causes. But on the back end, Jay-Z is going to be the middleman to promote homosexuality, lesbianism, and transgenderism, as well as feminism in the so-called black community through the NFL. Okay? So watch for that, because that's really the crux of the matter, and that's what cultural Marxism is all about. It's just a fancy way of utilizing the tactic of the Hegelian dialectic to bring together opposites. We're going to bring together the quote-unquote proletariat, i.e. the oppressed NFL players. We're going to demonize the ruling class, a.k.a. the NFL owners. And we're going to use Jay-Z as an agent of change to do it. Colin Kaepernick failed. Jay-Z, a.k.a. 007, will not and cannot fail.
We all know just last year, Jay-Z tried to convince Travis Scott not to perform at the Super Bowl show. And you know, Twitter doesn't forget, but one person even tweeting out, Jay-Z working with the NFL after trying to tell Travis Scott not to. So I want to ask you.
The reason why Jay-Z told Travis Scott to not work with the NFL is because he has the power to do so. He is the lead witch. He's the lead warlock. So they have to listen to him. As I tell you cats that come on my channel, there's an energy that people with a two-dimensional perspective perceive, and then there's the true energy that those with a three-dimensional heading into a fourth-dimensional perspective are able to understand. There's a difference between what goes on in front of the curtain and what goes on behind the curtain. Jay-Z is not just some nobody who comes out of nowhere and they arbitrarily pick him. There was an article in the paper maybe 8 or 9 years ago, maybe even a decade ago, that detailed how Jay-Z and Alicia Keys and Beyonce Knowles traveled over to London to sit down with the Rothschilds.
Why Jay-Z making this deal with the NFL after questioning Scott's halftime performance?
Love it. Love it, love it, love it, because the truth eventually all comes to the surface.
I agree with that.
Look, man, my position on Colin Kaepernick from the get-go was like, man, don't do something that interferes with your money.
He couldn't help it, Mr. Whitlock. What Colin Kaepernick is doing is all part of a certain narrative. I've done videos on his relationship with Nate Boyer, the former NFL long snapper who mysteriously appeared out of nowhere, who was a former Green Beret working over there in the Sudan, I believe it was, who had the power, the clout, and the prestige to tell Colin Kaepernick in the locker room how he should be protesting. And nobody says anything about that. Mr. Pro-Blackity Colin Kaepernick. But the real issue is that Colin Kaepernick is not actually pro-black. He's a cultural Marxist. And a lot of our people do not grasp the wrinkles there. That he's not for his people. He's for cultural Marxism. i.e. what you call today, or what the mainstream liberal media calls today, equality, which is meant to promote confusion through class and gender obfuscation. That's all it is. And we're going to examine that a little bit later, because that group of idiots, Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed and Kenny Stills, they're going to show you, based on their attire and also based on their origins, that they're not really for the so-called black community, because they don't understand the so-called black community. They're shields and they're pawns being used.
NFL is a vehicle for you to make money. That's all that the NFL has to offer you.
And none of these wokey woke Negroes on the internet ask themselves, how did the NFL suddenly become the face of racism, and who we need to blame or charge for the ills in the so-called black community? Nobody asks those questions, because our people are very easy to puppet.
Go get it. And unfortunately, Cap didn't take the advice. Now Jay-Z is giving the same advice. In my opinion, his actions speak louder than words.
Well, what Jay-Z's actions speak to me is that he's an opportunist, he's a prime capitalist, and he's someone who's been placed in a certain position to get a job done. He is 007. He's there to make it look like something that is not. It doesn't matter if he takes certain bullets or certain arrows, because he believes that he's going to win on a myriad of levels. Not only will he get to be the face of quote-unquote social change, he'll also get to reap the benefits of working in partnership with the most lucrative professional sports league in America, as well as amplifying the profile of quote-unquote Rock Nation. And as I've established in previous videos, that term rock is meant to be an allusion to Heru. That's why they talk about the Rock all the time. The Rock is the Baitulos, the missing capstone.
The NFL is a vehicle to make money. The social justice stuff on the field just isn't the smart play. So I love, and normally I criticize Jay-Z, but this is a smart move.
It's certainly a smart move. For clarification purposes, Jay-Z said he called Travis Scott to tell him don't take second fiddle to Maroon 5.
That's what he said today.
Oh, look, I felt that in the moment. I said he's not calling him in the moment when that came out, because there was never a transcript of what Jay-Z said. No. Reportedly, Jay-Z is calling Travis Scott.
When you throw a cat.
Well, you know what, brother? We have to wait and hear what Travis Scott has to say about what he was told by Jay-Z, because Jay-Z has a history of smudging the facts, or smudging the quote-unquote transcript, as you would say, of what exactly occurred in any type of telephone conversation between him and someone else. He smudges the facts and he smudges the timeline.
You don't know, it does kind of make it seem like it's about Cap.
Oh yeah, you can act.
Now, Whitlock just stated that due to the fact that Jay-Z would sport a Kaepernick jersey, he made it seem like it was about Kaepernick. I believe that what Whitlock is assessing correctly may I add, is that Jay-Z is an opportunist. He's someone who just jumped in when he had the proper time. And if he needed to masquerade as someone who was a fan of someone else, that was what he was going to do until he was able to get the windfall that he needed. It's always about the money. And we're also going to establish that Jay-Z has many key connections amongst some of these NFL owners, particularly Bob Kraft. But we'll be touching on that in a moment.
No, if you want to, but at the same time, he also called Cap for this situation. So
after the fact, go ahead.
It's during the fact, because there's no fact. There's like a conversation to make this a reality. And
no, not quite, brother. And this is where the fanboyism comes in. Marcellus Wiley's very intelligent, but he's a fanboy of Jay-Z. So when you're a fanboy, you start to gloss over certain important factoids. Jay-Z spoke to Colin Kaepernick after the deal was cemented. Deals like this don't just start and end in one day. They've been speaking probably for the last year. So Jay-Z did not tell Kaepernick about any of this over the past year. Nor would I have, because who the hell is Kaepernick? He's an idiot. I don't blame Jay-Z for not telling Kaepernick about any of this. But for his brand, associating himself with Kaepernick and wearing a Kaepernick jersey, one would think that he would have given him that, that level of respect. But he didn't, because once again, Kaepernick is a low-level agent. Jay-Z is a high-level agent. He's proverbial 007.
Was involved in that conversation. Travis Scott, your last #1 album was when? August 2018. Like
Sicko Mode.
Right before the Super Bowl. When was Maroon 5's? 2014. He basically said you can leapfrog them dudes and be the headliner. That
I have a hard time believing that Jay-Z was telling Travis Scott that he should be the headliner. I believe that Jay-Z was trying to stop Travis Scott from performing at the Super Bowl halftime show because he was trying to show the NFL his power over the other artists in the quote-unquote hip-hop world. And he has an extreme amount of power over all these so-called black artists. Jay-Z is a very high-level kabbalist. Once again, brothers, it's very important that you understand that behind the scenes, they're galvanized by witchcraft and so-called white magic and black magic. Blue witch, red witch, so on and so forth. They adhere to those principles, believe it or not.
This is a smart play by Jay-Z to say, look, I need to partner with the power, and I need to make sure I have control.
I'm not quite sure if that was his understanding. I believe that Jay-Z's sponsors let him know that he was going to get the control, which is a matter of breaking the NFL owners down. Jay-Z came into the situation already knowing what his role was going to be. I don't think that he had to negotiate with the owners on exactly what his role and the level of clout that he was going to have was going to be. It was just a process of making them understand the level of power that he has and who exactly is standing behind him.
Content and a seat at the table that's being respected and equitable. So yeah, smart play.
You know, every coach that had a great impact on my life had this one saying. And they said they loved us and cared about us. And I believed it. But the one thing he said, when it comes down to it, it's not personal. It's just business.
Let me say this, brother. I know that you say that every coach told you that he loved you and you believed it. Well, you should never believe that until the person has the opportunity to sacrifice themselves for you. And they either do or they don't. That word love is very powerful. And love is about loyalty and sacrifice. The job of a coach is very similar to the job of a pimp. That's why I stated in a previous video pertaining to the Rich Paul rule. The reason why the NCAA coaches were so upset is because basically they feared that Rich Paul might put a chink into their sex trafficking ring known as NCAA basketball, where they bring in these young recruits who they're going to send all across the country to make them money. That's what it's really about. So there is no love in business.
This is just business with Jay-Z. And if y'all really want this to be the mic and me to drop the mic, that's the mic dropping. How many hours are we on right now that Kaepernick has been denied work?
None. Zero. Zip. Zilch. That's another myth that gets spread by wokety wokes all across the internet. That Colin Kaepernick is sitting back not able to have a quote-unquote job. He has a job already. His job is to be an agent of chaos. That's why Nike is paying him. That's why other super liberal factions are paying him. Is to be an agent of chaos. That's why every 2 months he'll do another workout video where he's running around in slow motion with his pseudo husband Eric Reed, and they're running routes and throwing deep balls and so on and so forth. That's his job, is to keep up that image.
I'm done. If Kaepernick gets hired by the NFL today, are y'all upset or are you happy?
In other words, this brother here is speaking to the pro-blackities on Twitter and on the internet. He's letting them understand that you're not truly upset that Jay-Z has taken on this new position. What you're really upset about is that Kaepernick is not in the NFL. You know, so many liberal blacks are fond of talking about how Donald Trump loves to use distractions. Well, this is one of the bigger distractions that I've seen that gets propagated through the mainstream media. Pretty much only about 4 or 5 so-called black players in the NFL are kneeling, but Colin Kaepernick still gets mainstream coverage. Should that not tell you that he has very strong forces behind him trying to keep this story alive? That's the point of what this cat here is talking about, LeVar Arrington. He knows that these dudes on the internet are phony. As soon as Kaepernick gets another position in the NFL, they're not going to be upset anymore because they've been trained to believe that he's being oppressed and stopped from making money. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Mic is dropped, man. We got a problem with Jay-Z getting business, but if Kaepernick isn't denied more work and gets his work, now we okay.
Well, I'm going to say that Jay-Z is very clear. I'm a business man. And so...
Yes, Jay-Z worships money. He's been telling you that for the last 30 years. So what do you really expect? That's why I've never understood this notion that Jay-Z betrayed Kaepernick. In order for you to betray someone, you must have pledged your loyalty to them in the first place. A lot of idiots on the internet and on social media actually believed it when Jay-Z put on a Colin Kaepernick jersey. That was just part of the process of Jay-Z trying to ingratiate himself into that world so that he could set himself up for what he's receiving right now.
Always about business. The people that have tried to turn the NFL into something other than a business are mistaken.
And they're idiots. You never deal with a business on emotional terms. This belief that people should be boycotting the NFL until the NFL gives Colin Kaepernick a job. Well, wait a minute. I thought that the Colin Kaepernick issue was about police brutality. So shouldn't you stop watching the NFL until there's no more police brutality? And since you're so realistic, you should also stop watching the NFL until birds stop chirping and fish stop swimming.
He made fools up.
Yeah.
No, you got more?
Yeah, I want to add this point. The New York Times is reporting that also Robert Kraft was very instrumental in getting this deal done.
Of course, Robert Kraft was instrumental in getting this deal done, because Robert Kraft is another high-level Kabbalist who knows Jay-Z extremely well. And as I think about it, I do believe that there's a correlation between that bust that occurred in Florida, where Robert Kraft supposedly went to a spa to relax, and it actually was some type of illegal sex slave ring, and this story. That was a way to tell Robert Kraft, you're going to help Jay-Z get into this position, or we're going to open up more files on you. All these guys have files that can be opened at any moment. That's why I state that Jay-Z has very, very powerful people behind him.
In order to improve the league's kind of image by getting more celebrity endorsements with their social justice program.
And as we can see, Jay-Z and Robert Kraft are very good friends. We also see the super liberal, wokey woke Negro Van Jones there, as well as one of the owners of the Philadelphia 76ers on the right-hand side. This is the guy who handles Meek Mill. Both Robert Kraft and that owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, they handle Meek Mill, who's an asset, as well as Jay-Z handling Meek Mill. And you know what's so interesting about Jay-Z? As he plunges himself into the woke world, and I tell you, brothers, this wokeism is very lucrative now. It's very lucrative to be woke. Remember, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Jay-Z tried to mock Nas for quote-unquote being woke, because Nas was one of the few mainstream artists who tried to act woke back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But now it's very financially responsible to plunge into the woke world, because through social media, you have people who are going to buy your albums and stream your music if you're woke. Jay-Z understands that. So now he's taken the Meek Mill issue, and they've made Meek Mill supposedly the face of prison reform, also at the behest of who else? Bob Kraft and this dude on the right-hand side who presides over the Philadelphia 76ers. Meek Mill is what you call a golem. I may have mentioned this in the past. A golem is just someone who is viewed as having no soul. It's an ancient form of mind control, like a Frankenstein monster. That's all Meek Mill is. Remember that Meek Mill was the joke of the hip-hop world about 4 or 5 years ago, when they had that other asset, Drake, build up his portfolio or build up his hip-hop profile by just slaying him in a so-called rap battle. All it goes to show you is how easy it is to build up certain notable figures in the entertainment industry or in the public sphere, and how easy it is to tear them down just by how you cast them, how you place them. But once again, Meek Mill is a quote-unquote golem, basically an inanimate object, someone who's there to be puppeted. That's how he's considered. He's someone who has very close ties to Bob Kraft. For those of you brothers who are interested in the concept of the golem, it's basically similar to mankind on the sixth day, considered a proverbial beast, someone who does not have the higher spiritual understanding. The scriptures touch on it in Psalms 139-16.
And Boston's WEEI had a quote saying, the NFL's Q rating has taken a considerable hit in recent years due to the Kaepernick saga, and many of its owners' ties to President Trump.
We see Jay-Z and Beyonce here with Bob Kraft again. They take a lot of photos together, don't they?
Oh, is this a smart move by the NFL to partner with Jay-Z?
Now, I think Jay-Z's made a very smart move. I'm kind of withholding judgment on whether this is going to work for the NFL.
Well, the reason why the NFL has partnered with Jay-Z is because they were told to. Roger Goodell was told to do so by Bob Kraft, who clearly, in my view, was told to do so by a higher level of power that's unseen, who's working through Jay-Z. Jay-Z represents the interests of another sponsor or another faction that is unseen. I have very little doubt about that, most likely from overseas. Maybe whoever it is that George Soros is working alongside of. Once again, brothers, this is all about cultural Marxism. They're going to act as if they're trying to find a solution for so-called racism, but in reality, they're going to use Jay-Z as the point man to himself use the NFL as ground zero to promote social engineering. I've been telling you guys this for over a year now, maybe 2 years. They want the NFL to be like the NBA. They want it to be very liberal, very woke.
Fully. Because to me, the NFL is trying to use Jay-Z because they know we're headed towards a very volatile political year.
I would agree with that. I've stated this, that for you brothers out there who vote, when you get online, you better keep who you're going to vote for to yourself. Because I have very little doubt that there are going to be some casualties on these voting lines.
It's good. This election cycle over the next year is going to be bonkers. And the NFL doesn't want to be swallowed up by it. And I think they're hoping Jay-Z can help them in that regard.
I'm not quite sure that the NFL is as scared of what's going to happen in the voting process as they're scared in what could occur based on what they've been threatened with behind closed doors. Because if you look at Roger Goodell's face in that meeting with Jay-Z, he looks petrified.
I'm not so sure it's going to work.
I think it will work because you have two worthy partners, like the NFL, king of all sports in our country. Let's just be real about this.
Look at Roger Goodell just smile like Jay-Z is his best friend. This man's scared to death. I guarantee you on the phone talking to Jay-Z like, okay, so just please, just tell the Rothschilds we'll do whatever they want. Just don't mess with our league. Oh, my God.
Jay-Z certainly has his hand and his pulse of our culture understood fully.
Right, but Marcellus Wiley, what does that really mean? Jay-Z has his finger on the pulse of our culture, which is what I believe the brother meant to say. He kind of flubbed it a little bit. When you say that Jay-Z has the pulse on our quote-unquote culture, what exactly do you mean by black culture? No one ever asks any of these woke people what that term means to have a real culture. Do we have our ancestral language? Do we have our ancestral belief system? Do we have our ancestral family structure? Do we have our ancestral land? So what are you really talking about Jay-Z has his finger on the pulse of, other than nigga nonsense? He's a captain of nigga nonsense. He knows how to establish the flow of where nigga nonsense is going to go. That's all that means, at least to me.
Agree with him. Jay-Z has always been about what's next. And
well, he's a high-level witch. So he's not really about what's next. He's about casting spells to make other people do what he wants them to do. And that becomes next.
I mean, Jay-Z, his impact, one, he's not even on social media. He's like, y'all can talk about me good, bad, ugly, don't give a damn.
Because Jay-Z's too big to be on social media. People like him, Michael Jordan, Denzel Washington, they're not on no damn social media. They know that most people are ants. A lot of people might not like me saying that, but it's just the truth. Most people think like ants. They just do.
I'm going to live my life, and it's crazy. I saw Jay-Z when he's like, tell everybody to put on button up, stop wearing jerseys. Poor Mitchell and Ness. All them damn jerseys was gone out of business. And they still around, but come on, impact. And Jay-Z says, stop spending thousands of dollars on your car aftermarket and rims and all that. All of a sudden, everybody walking. Start going stock rims and stuff. Like, this dude has his pulse on the culture. So, yeah, it's a smart.
Well, he has his finger on the pulse is what you mean. And I do understand what you're saying. But really, Marcellus Wiley, you're describing exactly why Jay-Z is such an important asset for those who are backing him and therefore such an important asset for the NFL. Whenever you talk about people like Sean Combs or Dr. Dre or Jay-Z, people who appear in these magazines as being quote-unquote worth $1 billion, when we examine that term worth, not that they have, but that they're worth $1 billion, it's like if you were to go into your garage and you had a car that was worth $100,000. It's worth that to you and to whoever's willing to buy it because it's property. So Jay-Z and these other people, when we say that they're worth a certain amount, it's because they're owned. That's why we say that.
Because there's two willing, worthy partners that's going to make this happen.
It's 100% a smart move because Jay-Z isn't going to do anything to mess his brand up at this point in his career.
Jay-Z cannot mess his brand up at this point in his career. There's nothing that Jay-Z can do that would alter his brand other than to disrespect the divine feminine. That's the only thing that Jay-Z can do at this point in his life that could hurt his brand, is if he goes against the divine feminine, because this society is moving towards the veneration, the overt veneration of the divine feminine. That's why you hear these demonic women today talking about the universe. Oh, the universe is going to help me, or Mother Earth, or Mother Nature. Everything with them is about venerating the divine feminine. That's why Beyonce can make an album talking about how Jay-Z, quote unquote, allegedly cheated on her, which I don't think actually happened. I think that was just narrative to boost her up and to boost up the divine feminine aspect. I'm not saying that Jay-Z does not sleep with other women. What I'm saying is that I don't think that it's really as big an issue as Beyonce tried to make it out to be to sell her album. Point being is this: Jay-Z cannot come against the divine feminine. That's the only thing that could alter where his career is at right now. That's why Solange Knowles was able to whoop his ass in that elevator, because males today are not allowed to come against the divine feminine, at least high-level males in entertainment.
Those legendary entertainers, he has done something that most entertainers have not been able to do. The last guy that I recall getting close to this was Master P. And the culture has exploded since then. His was a debacle. Super dope businessman, but it was a debacle.
I wouldn't call it a debacle. I think that Master P is someone who was just not willing to do certain things, and he got left behind. Whenever you see these artists who have 25, 30-year careers and they're still in front of the camera and they're given a high level of exposure, it's because they'll do anything that they're told. It's very clear that Master P was not willing to do something that he was told. By no means am I trying to make him out to be a quote-unquote good guy. But when you see certain people get left behind, it's because it got to a point where they were supposed to do something and they said no.
Jay-Z with Master P.
Oh, stop that.
It wasn't good.
Next
Don't debate it.
Next
But the point is that with Jay-Z and what he represents, I think it's a great move because he does understand what the culture represents and people will buy in.
Once again, the culture is talking about Negro nonsense. Jay-Z knows how to cast spells on the weak-minded. Like in the film Star Wars, the concept of the Jedi mind trick. Remember, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's a witch, who's a high-level witch, he told Luke Skywalker that the Jedi mind trick only works on the weak-minded. Okay? So Jay-Z knows that he can get people to do what he wants them to do as long as they're weak-minded, as most people are. Most people are very weak-minded. So there's going to be a big hullabaloo right now, but it's going to subside as soon as the NFL and Jay-Z make a lot of overt gestures to quote-unquote help most so-called black people. That's going to be the initial phase. We have to try to come against this tide of Jay-Z selling out, quote-unquote. Once we do that, then we can go into what we're really about, which is promoting homosexuality, lesbianism, and transgenderism into the so-called black community through Jay-Z.
I'll push back against you guys. I think it's much harder to control or dictate to the culture. If you've looked online, people are apoplectic. And
I think you mean apoplectic, brother. But at the end of the day, I do agree with you. We're in the age of information. So it's much more difficult to manipulate people than it ever was in the past. Because it truly is one big think tank. The internet is one huge think tank. So you have various ideas that are exchanged that were never exchanged before. But we're in the last days right now. So these people are desperate. That's why you notice all these laws getting passed, all these so-called ritualistic days that are getting implemented out of the blue. August 22nd is supposedly black women's equal gender pay day. I mean, where did that shit come from? That came out of nowhere because they're trying to push certain energies really heavy right now because they understand, their elite understand that this thing is coming to a close relatively soon.
You know, people that Cap supporters are irate and think Jay-Z has sold out the world and how come Cap isn't a part of this. I think
Kaepernick cannot be a part of anything because he's not a leader. He couldn't lead a fly to shit. Or he was the quarterback of the 49ers. He couldn't lead. So you're asking about the wrong person. The real leader is Ness Nitty in their own household. So how could you ask him to do something for the world that he can't do in his own house?
This is going to have some mix. I got to see how the backlash plays out. I think you'll have certain NFL players, Eric Reed, other Kenny Stills perhaps, that will...
Eric Reed comes off to me like Colin Kaepernick's husband. I mean, I don't know how he comes off to y'all, but they come off like they're in a relationship. For Eric Reed to get so emotional all the time over that shit, nothing would shock me.
Want their attention and protesting and taking a knee and diving knee deep in politics is the way to get it. They're going to do it regardless of what.
Is this the anti-social sources, social media, the loud minority as the polling on this?
I feel you on that, Marcellus, but we also have to understand that social media is very influential. Yes, it is for the most part the quote-unquote loud minority, but you're talking about people who have millions of followers. Kaepernick has millions of followers on the internet. These people have millions of followers. So that element does have to be considered.
The people that influenced Kaepernick, Ness Nitty, Sean King, I'm looking at what their reaction to this. And so I'm just not sure if...
Ness Nitty, Sean King, a bunch of multi-ethnic, very confused people. But I'll be touching on that in another video.
Because again, the NFL to me isn't reacting to public; they're reacting to social media.
I don't believe that the NFL is reacting to social media. The NFL is reacting to very, very powerful factions that are unseen. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They're not concerned about social media. They're concerned about elements that are more powerful than them. In the business world, you only react to power. Now, of course, you have fan bases and the masses that have power to a degree, but they're not worried about the super liberal element, because if you just look at so-called black people, what percentage of so-called blacks who devoutly watch football have stopped doing so because of Colin Kaepernick? Maybe 15%, maybe 20% at the most. The NFL gets most of its viewership from conservative Caucasians, unlike the NBA, which does not care about middle America. The NFL actually does care about middle America and has a lot of teams situated in middle America that it caters to. And even on the coast, where it's more liberal, their viewership is still high. So they're not concerned so much, at least in my view, about the backlash from woke Twitter and black Twitter, all that bullshit. They've been given certain directives by a sponsorship or by a faction that is unseen, that is behind the curtain, to help them understand that, yes, you're going to hire Jay-Z, quote unquote, hire him in a partnership capacity, and it's going to work out for the best for all involved. Kaepernick did not work out properly. He malfunctioned. It kind of blew up in everybody's face. We're moving on to phase 2. Here's 007. You're going to work through him.
The whole political problem to me for the NFL is via social media, not in the real world.
That's safest move. Bringing Jay-Z on board.
Yeah, it's
the best, safest move for the NFL.
That's exactly why it was done. Jay-Z has a face that the Negroes trust.
That's safest move for the NFL at this point.
All right, what's next?
Yeah, so Jay-Z has actually already spoken with Kaepernick about the partnership, and when he was asked if he has plans on involving Cap, Jay-Z said, quote, "You have to ask him. I'm not his boss."
He's talking about Ness Nitty. Ness Nitty is that man's boss. And I told you guys this 2 years ago. I had so many woke niggas that was on my channel. What are you talking about, Ness Nitty and MK Ultra and handlers, and what are you referring to? Only now are people starting to say things that I was telling you cats 2 years ago about who's telling who what to do.
Do you guys think Kaepernick should be involved?
Well, I would need to see Kaepernick's musical resume before I would sign off on Cap being involved in the music aspect. And then I would like to see, beyond kneeling, his social justice resume. The guy doesn't talk.
Well, I have to stop you there for a moment, Whitlock, because many of Kaepernick's followers will tell you that he has different organizations that do certain things. Look, for the most part, all Kaepernick does is give away book bags to kids and quote unquote tell them what their rights are. His job is to push the victimization mentality amongst young kids of color, especially young black kids. You got to be afraid of every cop because the cop is your number one enemy. Not low self-esteem or poor self-image or being miseducated in some of these schools or these gangs that are going to try to recruit our young boys or try to pimp out our young girls. It's the cops that you have to watch out for. They're the main thing that you have to know your rights about. Are the police an issue in the so-called black community and certain processes of policing? Absolutely. But is it the number one problem? No. All Kaepernick is another multi-ethnic, confused dude who has no place trying to lead. A lot of people don't like it. I said this months ago. Biracial, multiracial, so-called black people or people who identify as quote-unquote black, they have no business trying to lead the so-called black community. You can be in the group, but you can't be at the front. No way in the world.
If you don't talk, Jay-Z's out here talking.
Yeah.
Kenny Stills talking. Other people. People talking. Cap doesn't talk. So if you don't talk and you don't make...
Theatricality and deception are powerful agents in the minds of the uninitiated. That's what Ra's al Ghul told Bruce Wayne in in Batman Begins. And that's also what Bane reiterated to Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight Rises. Never underestimate the power of silence.
What's your qualifications to work in this initiative?
Look, I'm with Jay-Z. Ask Cap. And Jay-Z's like, I did ask Cap, and he's not here. So any further involvement will have to be by his doing, not by our pulling. Jay-Z learned a valuable lesson when him and Dame Dash, started off. Rockaware, Rock Nation, and back in those days. Jay-Z ain't with all that smoke, man. It's just...
No, the valuable lesson that Jay-Z learned is that you always follow the more powerful wizard. Dame Dash, he's a practitioner of the Kabbalah as well. That's why they named their organization Rockefeller. It was a play on words, not only to the understanding of where Jay-Z's career was going to go, but also an allusion to Heru. Heru, a.k.a. Lucifer, is the rock. He is the Baitulos. He's the capstone. When Jay-Z ran into higher level Kabbalistic witches or warlocks like Lyor Cohen made Jay-Z make a very pivotal decision. You can stay with this dude, Damon Dash, or you can come with me and I'll make you president of Def Jam. So from the moment that Jay-Z chose Lyor Cohen, his life path was set on a higher level of Luciferianism and influence. Had he stayed with Dame Dash, who knows? He might not even register in the musical sphere anymore.
Look, keep your eye on the prize. And if we're not going to continue moving this forward, a lot of people get disturbed when your focus is capital. But what do you have to show for all your content and creation if you don't pull capital, which is going to change you and your culture and your environment?
Well, Marcellus Wiley, I can answer that question for you. The reason why many of the wokedies and the fake pro-blacks on the internet talk about capital and how they associate that with selling out is because they know within their mind that they would have no idea what to do with the capital if they were to work alongside powerful factions. They don't know how to build. They don't know how to administrate. They don't know how to lead because they don't have a ruling class mentality. As I tell people on my channel all the time, pro-blacks are actually pro-white. They talk a lot of shit and they're very poor planners. They have no planning skills whatsoever. And that's why when I give them solution-oriented scenarios, I ask the wokedies and the pro-blackities and, the people who like to maintain this veneer of being rebellious, how come you have not, number one, either started a revolution, a real revolt, or number two, left this country and gone back to whatever country you claim you're from? They never have an answer. Because all this is a temper tantrum by a large portion of our people who seek validation from the Caucasian. That's all this is about. And that's really what cultural Marxism is meant to perpetuate. This back and forth between the proletariat and the ruling class, under the assumption that there's going to rise a divine faction who knows what to do with your money. We're going to tax you and take in all your money and then redistribute it. That's why they sell people like Bernie Sanders and a lot of these latecomer female Democrat politicians to our people. We're meant to associate the female with great leadership and with being benevolent and benign. And people like Bernie Sanders, super liberals, with being benevolent and benign. It's part of that cultural Marxism paradigm. And Jay-Z's a part of it. His job, once again, is to re-engineer the NFL so that the NFL can be used as a re-engineering tool for society.
Generational wealth. I hate when people say he only about money. I'm like, what are you about? And
talking shit.
Kaepernick, if Kaepernick wants to get involved, you know they were willing to involve him. Obviously, he doesn't want to. In terms of social justice issues, Kaepernick doesn't want to go into open forum about that because he will get exposed. There are PhD people in private who I've talked to who are on the ground who are like, that's never happening. And less is more is his campaign.
Of course, because that's how they have to market him. How else are they going to market him? If you're a pimp and you selling the broad, you're not going to sell her on her intellect. You're going to sell her on the fact that she got a fat ass and big titties. I mean, you got to market what they have. So what Kaepernick has going for him is that he was considered a former great athlete, not a former great intellect. There's only so far he's going to be able to go to describe the quote-unquote injustices. And keep in mind, all this started back in 2016 while Obama was still president. People forget that. When Alton Sterling and the brother up there in Minnesota got shot and everybody made a huge deal about it, that the cops were killing black men, unarmed black men all over America. 2 murders on social media. And of course, we do know that the so-called black man is a very important component that's used to maintain the prison industrial complex. But the fact that so many of these woke athletes jumped on that and then have subsequently tried to blame Trump, even though these issues started while Obama was president, shows you how insincere and how low level they are in their thought process.
For those reasons, because there are people who are really vested in this, and Kaepernick's the face of it right now, but this is an age-old problem.
Kaepernick's not truly the face of anything, and that's part of the problem. You have people trying to fight to see who's going to get the credit for something that's been going on long before them. Ness Nitty, his quote-unquote girlfriend, really his handler, is obsessed with him maintaining as the quote-unquote face of this because she wants him to get credit, knowing that if he gets credit, that's going to amplify her profile overall.
When you were growing up, when I was growing up, and now he has this power, but I think he wants to exercise it in the less is more campaigning, and it's unfortunate.
Well, he's had a lot of people speak for him, and that's probably why he has maintained silence. It's, like you said, I think it's more impactful, or I won't say it's more, I think it is, but some people may think it's more impactful to have other people tell your story and scream your praises and say what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I agree with Jason, brother. Please stop. That has nothing to do with why Kaepernick is not speaking. He's not speaking because he has nothing to say. It's not because other people telling his story will make it more impactful. He's a one-trick pony just like he was as a quarterback.
Can't do it. There's a reason why you don't see me in a Speedo.
But it's safe.
I can't do it.
You could do it.
No.
No, you damn sure can't do it. And please never bring up that imagery ever again.
If you wanted to. Now what the results of it will be something that's up for debate. But that might not work either. I mean, it's all about how you feel about yourself, Whit. And I'm telling you right now, we know how Kaepernick feels about himself right now. He feels like he's being denied work, and that...
No, he doesn't, brother. With all due respect, that's a lie. Kaepernick does not feel like he's being denied work. The people around him are propagating this notion, in my view, a false notion, that he's being denied work. His cult on social media is propagating the false notion that he's being denied work. He's not truly being denied work because he's still getting paid. He's getting paid as an actor. He acts like he wants to be a football player when he really doesn't.
This is why you let other people talk for you, because then you could say behind the scenes, I didn't say that. Well,
and isn't it so interesting? I stated this last season when the Carolina Panthers had this issue over who was going to be their new owner. I had surmised that it was going to be Sean P. Combs. But either way, I knew that whoever their new owner was going to be, he was going to be super liberal. And is it some type of irony that their owner ended up being the one who hired Eric Reed, who has been nothing but an agent of chaos in the NFL since he was brought back in?
I represented this singular deal. This whole denied work. I don't want to hear from nobody in this economy saying, I'm denied work. The NFL ain't the only job.
That's fair.
I know a bunch of people that want to play in the NFL.
That's
I
fair.
can raise my hand.
That's fair.
You transition to something else.
He already has something else, Whitlock. He's an actor.
So quit whining, deny work. No, you're too lazy to get off your ass and get a job.
He don't need a job. He already got one. He works for Nike and he works for a lot of other forces and factions, etc. He's getting paid handsomely just to sit at home, get up at 5 in the morning, do a little 2-hour workout, film it every once in a while, put it on his social media. That's all he needs to do.
If you are being sensible about denied work and you have the hours mounting on the show,
get a real job.
Okay.
Join the rest of them.
Move on from it. Jay-Z, all right. Move on.
Coming up.
But anyway, that's basically it on that, brothers. Overall, just to put a little bow on it, do I think that Jay-Z and Kaepernick are at odds? No, I do not. I just think that Jay-Z is a higher level manifestation that is hopefully going to accomplish, at least in the eyes of his sponsors, what they wanted Kaepernick to accomplish. This Kaepernick narrative, if you notice, they never let it die out. They never let it go away because it's a production for the masses to take in, so that when everything is finally completed or consummated, he can come out looking like some type of hero. In my mind, eventually, Jay-Z is going to be at the forefront of bringing Kaepernick back into the NFL, if even for a brief moment. And that will be the finality of this narrative. But anyway, peace.